So in this week's class, or this month's class, we're going to do the mug rugs, and then I have enlarged some of the designs so that you can make towels or aprons or whatever you want, placemats to match your mug rugs. So the first thing you can see, I have my computer set up with the instructions up on the screen. And I suggest you do that, or you print out the instructions so you can follow along step by step. And each individual mug rug has its own set of instructions as far as placement of the fabrics and where you add fabrics and the tack down stitches and everything that needs to be done. Then there's individual pictures, which I will go through step by step on the video of how to place the fabrics and the batting and so on. So the one I'm going to work on today is the shamrock. So I will scroll down till I get to the shamrock, which looks like it might be the last one. Nope, not quite the last one. So there's my stitching instructions for just the shamrock. But the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way back up to the top, and I'm going to check and see if I have everything on my materials list, and then I will cut out all my pieces, and then I will begin. So the first thing on my materials list, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit here. No, that didn't work very well. So the first thing is 5x7 hoop. So I have my 5x7 hoop, and I already have my cutaway stabilizer in the hoop. The reason why I'm using my 6 needle machine today, which you can see right here, is because when I did the samples for the class before I went to Florida, for some reason the Dream Machine, the tension wasn't right on the bottom, and it was pushing the fabric. Now my MC12000 Janome is working, but that one's a little harder when I video. I have to video with the camera on top of the desk because that hoop comes from behind the machine, and my desk is an L shape, so it doesn't work very well to video using that machine. So anyway, you can see I have my 3 fabrics here, which is the what actually each one of the patterns takes 3 fabrics, at least 3 fabrics, and most of them take a few more because they have more applique pieces. This one just has the big shamrock on it, so it's pretty easy to do. Then it calls for thin batting. You can use your 80-20. This happens to be Stable Bat, which is a combination of stabilizer and batting all in one. Any kind of low loft batting or fleece will work. And then the other thing I have is my tape. I happen to be using Kimberbell tape, but any paper tape should work. I'm going to use fabric fuse to fuse the back of the, I don't have one here, all my samples are at the store, but the opening in the back before you turn, in other words, when you make the mug rug, it's inside out. So you have to be able to turn it, and then that opening on the samples at the store, I used Heat and Bond Light, but I don't have any, so I'm going to use this fabric fuse, and it works extremely well. And I did put some 505 spray here just in case I need it. And like I said, here's my roll of Soft and Sure stabilizer. So I'm going to cut my pieces, and then I will come back. Well, I guess I'm ready to start. When I did the December class, actually, I guess it was the January class, my remote control for my video camera for my iPad stopped working. I put new batteries in it and it still doesn't work. And I actually forgot that that had happened. So every once in a while, you're going to see me reach up and stop the camera from filming. So I guess I'm ready. I have my computer set up on my right-hand side with the instructions, with the PDF file open for the instructions and for the shamrock that we're going to do. I printed out the actual steps for placement. And then, like I said, my computer is open, so I will follow along so that you guys know in the instructions where I'm at as I'm doing the mug rug. So I did cut all the pieces from the fabrics that I showed you earlier. So in the materials list, it says a 5x7 hoop. So obviously, here's my 5x7 hoop for this machine. I've hooped the soft and shear stabilizer. It doesn't matter what stabilizer you use as long as it's a cutaway stabilizer. I'm going to use the soft and shear because there is a piece of batting in between there, and that will give it enough stability that and I don't want my mug rugs real stiff. So I've done that, and then it says to cut a piece of thin batting, which I did. It's a 6x8 piece. You can use fleece. You can use stable bat. You probably could use flannel if you wanted to. Any low loft fabric or batting would work. So that's that. Then the next thing, it says to cut a 6x6 piece of your larger background fabric, and this will go on the left side. So this will go over here on this side when you're constructing the mug rug. So then it says to cut the smaller background for the right side and to cut it approximately a 4x6. So that one's going to go right there. If it's directional, make sure, because it's going to go into the hoop sideways like this, or depending on the orientation of the hoop for your machine, just pay attention if it has little animals or whatever on it, that they're going the way you want to. If this had a directional, a tree, like I said, or an animal or whatever, I would want to make sure it was going in the up and down direction. Then the next piece that you cut, fabric 3, is the backing, and you cut it 6x9, and you need 2 of them. And what you're going to do is you're going to fold them in half. So when you get done folding them for the back, they're going to overlap just a little bit. And that's where the you can either use Heat and Bond Light, or like I said, when I'm done, I'm going to fuse it with this fabric fuse. And they do sell this at the picket fence, and it works really good. Then the last piece, this particular mug rug only has one applique, so you would get your fabrics ready for your applique piece, and this is for the whole shamrock. And I also, on each piece, I ironed SF101 on the back. Just gives it a little bit more stability. The only pieces that I did not iron the SF101 is on the backing pieces. Otherwise, all these other pieces have the SF101 ironed on them. Obviously not the batting piece. So I'll get started. And if you scroll down on your instructions, down to where it shows you exactly the pictures of how to do it, the very first picture is a picture of your hoop with the batting in it, and it tells you to lay the batting inside the hoop. So I'm going to spray it just a little bit. You can tape it if you want to. And I'm going to lay my piece of batting inside there. And then I will do the first stitch, which is actually, it's the placement line for the batting. So I'm going to start the machine. I have it all ready, all set up. And the very first thing, like I said, that's going to stitch is going to stitch the batting to the stabilizer. And basically it's the outline stitch. And I'm sure the machine sounds pretty loud on the video. It's not as loud as it sounds on the video, but I'm sure it does echo some. I do have my machine set at 600 stitches per minute. This one will go at least 1,000 stitches. I don't ever run it that fast. Plus, on this one, I have to stop it, do a reserve stopper. It's going to just keep right on stitching because it's a 6 needle. It'll just keep on going through the colors. So anyway, the very first one is the placement line. And then if you look at your instructions, it'll say the basting stitch for lining up the fabrics. So the next thing that's going to stitch is just going to be a line down. It's not really down the center. And what that's going to do is it's going to show you where to line up your first piece of fabric. Throughout the whole project, you pretty much will use the same color thread, except when you come to the appliques, you're probably going to want to use the color thread that matches your fabric, because this shamrock is only one piece of fabric. It's pretty easy to decide what colors of thread to use. So I'm going to stitch the next step, which is going to be that placement line for the left piece of fabric. And you can see it stitched that line. You can't see it real good because it actually, on this machine, it stitched it in white. So then the next thing, in the instructions on step number 4, it says to place your fabric 1, your 6x6 piece, just below that basting stitch. The fabric should be face up. So it would be this way. I'm going to spray that just a tad so it doesn't move. I apologize for stepping in front of the camera. Then I'm going to snap it back in the machine, and I will stitch the next step. Oh, and if I would continue to read, step number 5 says, before returning the hoop to the machine, lay fabric 2 with the right side facing down. So it pays to read your instructions before you continue. So this is fabric 2, says to lay it face down, because after it stitches, you'll fold it open like that. So lay it face down, lining it up right along that line, same placement line that you laid the first piece of fabric. And it says, obviously on your instructions, it says both fabrics will be lined up along the basting line, which I just said was right here. So now it's going to tack the fabric to the batting. And I just pull this piece of thread. Sometimes this machine cuts the tails too short, even though I have it at the longest setting. And then it comes unthreaded. So now you can see that stitched that down, and the instruction says to flip it over, either finger press it or use one of your little devices. I have a couple of them here. One's bamboo and one's a plastic. Just kind of run it along there. Or I also do have my iron set up behind me. But this seems to do the job, so I'm going to put just a little bit of spray on there, and that'll hold it in place. Going to put the hoop back in the machine. And in the instructions, they've used a piece of tape and taped it. And as you saw me, what I used was the spray. So the next thing that's going to stitch is on each individual mug rug, there's a different stipple pattern. This one just happens to have the regular stippling, which is the curved lines. So I'm going to let the machine stitch that, and then I will be back. So as I was sewing, I noticed as it was stitching that it's probably hard to see on the video, but there's loops. Maybe you can see it over here. I thought it was the needle, because this is a 6 needle, and I don't write down when I change the needles. I don't change them all at the same time, which I probably should, but that's beside the point. So I thought it was the needle. So when it got done stitching, I changed the needle. I was going to put a purple tip Janome needle in it, and I discovered that's already what was in it, was a purple tip. And I did test the end of the point, and it felt pretty sharp, but I threw it away. So anyhow, I got a purple tip out, and then when I realized I already had a purple tip in there, I got a size 12 embroidery titanium needle. Then I flipped the hoop over and realized it had nothing to do with the needle. It was the bobbin that was giving me problems. So on this particular mug rug, I do believe I'm going to go ahead and finish it. Now, I did put a different bobbin in there. If I was going to sell this or give it as a gift, I would redo it, but I don't have anything special to do with this particular mug rug. I was using, this machine takes an L bobbin, which the Janome and most of the regular machines, embroidery machines that aren't multi-needle, take a class 15 bobbin. So I use the Filtech, which normally work really well, but for whatever reason, this one did not. So the other thing that I try, and if you have a machine with this kind of bobbin, you can, or shuttle, you can run the edge of, this is just a piece of cardstock. And actually your bobbins, I should grab one, you can run a piece of cardstock or not a credit card, they're too thick, up in there, and if there's any lint, it'll push that out of there, which sometimes on this machine it does happen. So anyhow, I decided to get a different bobbin completely, and I'm going to put that in the machine and see how it works. So if you're following along on your computer, or if you printed out the PDF instructions, your next step will be step 10. And that's the portion of the applique on whichever particular mug rug you're working on. Because I'm working on the shamrock, I did the background quilting stitch, which is number 4. And then it does start my applique stitch, and the very first thing that's going to stitch is going to be the placement for the shamrock. So I will stitch that and see if that helped, that changing the bobbin. I actually changed the bobbin and the needle, so I'm not sure if it stitches better now, which one of those two things worked. If that doesn't work, I'm not going to mess around with it anymore at all. For right now, I'm just going to change to a different needle, which is the advantage of having a multi-needle machine. And upon further review here, I can see it did take a couple of extra loops here, which means it wasn't either one of those problems. So definitely on the bottom, it's still bad. So I'm going to change to needle number 5. It has the same color thread on it. If that doesn't work, then I'm going to get a whole different bobbin shuttle out completely. So I went ahead and stitched this again, and I decided to use white thread so that I could see, because if I used green thread, I wouldn't be able to see which one was creating problems. So the white thread stitched fine. So it's definitely not the bobbin case or the bobbin. Whatever is wrong with needle number 3, I will just not use needle number 3 until I have a chance to take the machine apart and look at it. So you can see on the back, it's kind of hard for you to see, but the white definitely is not. The loops are being caused from the green. So I will continue to the next step on the sheet, and it says the tack down for the shamrock. So if you look on your PDF, it tells you to put the fabric, depending on which one you're making, but on this particular one, it says to put the piece of fabric down. Oops, I have that the wrong way. Over top of your placement line. My fabric is plenty big enough, so you don't need to cut yours that big. I don't know why I did. I just did. So obviously you're not going to spray that because you don't want to spray it on top of that good piece. So I'm just going to use a little bit of tape here and tape this into, tape it on there to hold it in place. And then I will stitch the next step, and I need to change the needle number because we know needle number 3 is not working. So I'm going to change it to needle number 6. And I will stitch that and see how that works. So it is finished stitching, and I did notice just 1 or 2 little loops. The back looks fine. It's hard for you to see because of the original loops, but it does look okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim and leave about, it's so hard to say, 1/32 of an inch on the right side of the stitching line, because on all the samples that I did, I usually trim really, really close. And I did notice when I did that, the zigzag stitch didn't quite catch that outside. So I'm going to leave just a little bit of fabric there and trim it, and then it will do a satin stitch on this particular design. So you can see I've trimmed it. Try to hold this pretty close. And you can see about how much I've left. Like I said, normally I trim right up next to the line, but then it wasn't catching. So I altered my cutting habit a little bit there. So I'm going to go ahead and do the satin stitch outline, which is the next step on this particular pattern. Like I said, there's only one applique on this design. So this one was a pretty easy one. So I'll put that back in the machine, and hopefully the satin stitch stitches okay. I'll get it started and let you see, and then I will probably stop it because I know it's fairly noisy. So on your instruction sheet, because there's only one applique, we are on step number 7 if you're doing the mug rug. And I have no idea why that stopped in between there. And I see actually the thread came out of my needle. I am stitching the satin stitch. I just stopped the machine so that I could talk. And at this intersection and one of the intersections up here before it starts the next rounded part, the machine did stop and cut. That has nothing to do with your machine. That has to do with the way that the design was digitized. For some reason, there's a trim code in there. Sometimes the designs may be digitized in a program. I have 3 different digitizing programs, and depending on which one you use, it may stick a trim code in there. And if I digitize a design to work with this machine or my Dream Machine, which is PES format, and then I take it into a program, a different program, or even the same program, but then save it as a JEF, that too will sometimes cause the design, the finished design, to do strange things. So if yours stops and trims, it's not your machine, it's the design. If you're doing the shamrock, and actually probably on most of the other designs also, whoever digitized this, when they go around the applique the first and second time, it's a wider zigzag stitch. Then when it does the very final satin stitch, it's a nice close together stitch. So I just wanted you to be aware it's going to do a couple of go rounds around the whole applique with a wider stitch, which actually tacks it down a lot better. So that is good when the digitizer does that. So now I'll continue with my satin stitch. It does look like the machine is behaving okay as far as not creating loops on this last final satin stitch. So I'm going to shut the camera off so you don't have to listen to all this noise, and then I'll be back when it finishes. Okay, it's finished stitching, and you can see it did a really good job on the satin stitch. No loops at all. And if I turn it around to the back, it also did a good job. No loops. You can see most of the top thread is coming to the back. Usually it's supposed to be 1/3 bobbin and 2/3 top thread showing. This ratio isn't like that, but because it is stitching okay, I'm just going to leave it. So I'm going to put the hoop back in the machine, and the next thing to stitch on this is step number 8, which is going to put a line down the middle of the satin stitch that holds it from snagging on anything and just gives it a little bit more of a secure stitch. I am going to do that in a little bit darker green. It's up to you if you want to do it in whatever color you want, obviously, but I want a little bit of a contrast. So I will go ahead, do that, and then I will be back. So that last final outline stitch did stitch, and when I tip it sideways, I can see just a couple little loops. I guess the next thing I could try would be to put a size 14 needle in there. And the reason why I say that, because a 14 needle has a bigger tip. And this is a back stitch. Because there's already so many stitches here, that could be another reason why it's skipping a little bit. It's gone down into that same hole so many times that there's too many threads there. So maybe when I'm going to do a towel with the same design on it. I said I made all the designs bigger for you, so if you want to make towels to match. So I am going to do a towel, and possibly then I'll put a size 14 needle in it. Or the other thing I might try is putting a little bit thinner batting. Maybe I'll use a fleece instead of the stable bat. The stable bat is pretty firm. So not sure exactly what the problem is, although, like I said, it's not too bad. It's not as bad as when I first started. So the next step on this design, which is step number 9, is just going to put a little swirl here. Probably because it's a pretty plain design. So I'm going to do that in the dark green also. I will go ahead and start it, and then I will stop the video so you don't have to listen to the noise, and hopefully it stitches okay. So that little swirl detail stitched pretty nice. There is just a tad bit of a stitch in between each one of them where it didn't. Obviously, you could just leave it, or you can trim it. Just make sure you don't tip your scissors too far forward and put a hole in the fabric. So the very last thing that's going to stitch on all of the mug rugs is going to be your backing. And as I said in the first part of the video, you take your 6x9 piece and you fold it in half sideways. And then you will have a 6 by 4.5 piece. So you're going to lay your pieces so that the fold part is towards the middle, and they are going to overlap quite a bit. Just make sure that the edge of the fabric there, this is the outline where it's going to stitch. Hopefully you can see that. So make sure that when you place your fabric on there, you can't see any of that stitching, that you completely cover that. And it does overlap, looks like about 1 inch. So I do believe I'm going to put a piece of tape on there. And then probably, I don't want it to catch on my foot. I don't know for sure which way it's going to go around. I think I'm going to switch this around so that the left side is on the top, because I think it's going to go around clockwise. But I'm still going to put a little piece of tape there, and just a little piece of tape here, and then a bigger one in the middle. You can see that's where the foot is going to go directly over, although when it comes this way, it could snag there. And if you want, you can put a piece of tape over on the edge also. I'm not going to come in too far. I don't like it when it stitches through the tape. It doesn't gum up the needle, but sometimes it's hard to get off get the tape off. So I'll put it back in the machine, start the last step, which I'm going to switch it to color number 6, tell it okay, and go ahead and stitch that. It is doing a back stitch. If you can see that, I got real close to the edge. Hopefully it catches it all the way around. I should have brought that particular piece of fabric over just a little bit farther. On this machine, my needle bars are not adjustable height-wise. So if I have a thicker seam, I cannot raise the foot, not necessarily the needle bar, the foot right here. I can't raise and lower that like I can on all my other embroidery machines. Looks like it's almost finished. I don't believe it'll go around a second time because it is doing a bean stitch, which actually is also known as a triple stitch. So it will probably stop. And then I'm going to check to make sure I caught it on this side. I did just catch it. So I'm going to take it out of the hoop. I'm going to trim all the way around, and then I'll turn it to the right side. Had some extra trays out there, and I do have a couple that are painted, and you can see I sold them as sets. This is just 2 pieces of fabric. It doesn't have any design on the front. So some of them, most of them, when I painted them, I distressed the edges a little bit, and then I found a couple of plain ones. I did buy these quite some time ago, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Family Dollar still has them. And I will give these 2 away for part of the door prize.